Welcome to another edition of Down the Road. That Steve Hall that we talked about yesterday, the superintendent of Kindred Public Schools, he is going to join us today, or at least I hope we work it all out. And also, we have a number of topics that we want to discuss in relation to hearings that went on today in D.C. in regards to the withdrawal of Afghanistan. But first, the crowd that was in Bismarck, the crowd that is in Bismarck, I should say, that's looking at redistricting and looking at kind of wrapping up going into the special session, what we see happening. I don't know of anyone better to talk to than the Minority Leader, Josh Boschee, who's been working on this all since day one. Representative Boschee, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Great to be here, Joel, as always.
I can't imagine a worse committee to sit on than redistricting. This could not have been a joy to work on.
Well, it certainly had its challenges, but for the most part, the committee is a very reasonable committee, and a lot of times it just comes down to the math. We're now just starting to hear from folks that are not happy with some of the preliminary proposals that are likely going to be approved this afternoon or tomorrow morning, but that's unfortunate due to the short time frame we've had to work in this. That's, I think, what's made it the challenge is the short time frame.
When I first was elected to the North Dakota Senate, I was 32 years old. And every session that I served, there was a conversation in regards to the fact that we're going to become more of an urban state, urban by North Dakota standards, obviously. In any other state, Williston, Jamestown, those communities wouldn't be seen as big communities, but in North Dakota they are. And so when you look at the growth in Williston and you look at the huge growth in Fargo and Bismarck and some of those other areas, is that horse completely out of the barn? Before we get into specifics on redistricting, can we just quit talking about urban versus rural and realize that when it comes to urban, that's where the people are and that's where they're going to stay?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. We've seen a slow depopulation of rural North Dakota, and it's not that people are leaving the state. They are going to places like Bismarck, Fargo, but we even saw some depopulation in the Grand Forks area, in the Minot area, but the growth area was out west, Williston, Watford City. So we're seeing those districts get smaller, and the Williston area will get a third district this go around instead of the two that they usually have.
Want to talk a little bit about not just the process, but the results. Today, there's a lot of complaints, a lot of talk about what we could do. And of course, you're going to be hearing some of those tomorrow. But how locked in is the redistricting map? In other words, how do the Democrats and Republicans feel about it? How does the urban and the rural feel about it?
Yeah, I think we're about 95% done with our work. Last week was basically stitching together the various different proposals. We just last night received what we're calling the preliminary map, which is what everything looks like together statewide. There's some tweaks that have to happen because of some numbering that is different than what we anticipated last week when it comes to population. But beyond that, I mean, we are not going to see major changes that like entire districts recreated or giant lines moved, because for the most part the map works out. And I think the big win is that because of the work of Senator Oban and myself and some of our Republican colleagues, was to prioritize county lines. Some of the initial maps, if people were to go back and look at them, they would see that there was a lot of counties that would have 2, 3 legislative districts, or a lot more counties were subdivided between 2 different districts. And because of the conversations and the advocacy we did along with the Association of Counties, when you look at the map, a lot of the lines are going to make sense. The hard part, of course, is when you get into cities like Fargo and Bismarck, Minot and Grand Forks, because now you're dealing with city streets. And so we really try to put pressure on making sure they're main thoroughways, because voters don't, they look at, do I live north of 32nd Avenue or south of 32nd Avenue? Do I live in Stark County or do I live, in Golden Valley County? And so that's how we want to make sure voters can identify with their district. And I think we got some good work done with that.
I want to talk about that. Let's use an example as you look at the map right now, folks, and you see some of these districts. If you look down in that southeast corner, and yes, I'm very familiar with the southeast corner, parts of Lemoore County, parts of Cass County, parts of Barnes County, some of that was all cut up before. You know, people are mad about districts going away, but the county lines and even the town lines in District 26 at the time weren't observed. And they did that specifically to draw legislators, sitting minority legislators in with other minority legislators, so they'd have to run against each other. So I do want to congratulate both you, Senator Oban, and the reasonable Republicans for looking at that. But districts go away. The district that I had when I first ran was District 27. They got rid of 27. 27 became in part 26 and part of 25. You look now, that county line in Richland County where I live, that's about as clean as you can get it and still get the population you want. You're going to hear protests tomorrow, Representative Boschee, from individuals whose district is going away if this map ends up being the end product. What do you say to them? What do you say to the individuals that are going to sit there and say, look, I was just elected 2 years ago and you're taking my position away?
Yeah, you know, first and foremost, it's the math. We, you know, in those parts of the state, just like the northeast corner of the state and the center of the state, we saw a lot of people leave. They moved out. And so that depopulation at a time when we have to grow legislative districts in numbers already just made them bigger. And that's unfortunate for rural North Dakota. Now, specifically to the legislators that are starting to log some complaints about it, you know, I think, you know, you and I, there was a letter directed at us by Senator Heitkamp this weekend. I'm amazed by the power I have as the House Minority Leader of one of two votes on the Redistricting Committee to carve him out. But what he fails to recognize is Richland County is based on the math. There are 16,540 some people in Richland County, according to the census. A perfect legislative district divided based on the numbers that we came up with is 16,576. I mean, you couldn't think of a better district. And again, you look at a lot of these county lines when you start lumping, you know, the new proposed District 28, it's almost spot on to that 16,576. And so, you know, they can have whatever rhetoric or frustrations that they want. It comes down to they were in areas that the lines moved. We made more whole counties. And I think you ask the average voter to look at that map and they're going to say, yeah, that makes sense.
You know, the testimony that you received from a representative like Representative Scraw, you know, she came in front of your committee and said that one of the failings of your committee is the fact that you didn't look at ambulance districts. And I'll repeat that, ambulance districts. She didn't talk about counties. She didn't talk about townships. She didn't talk about some of the basic things that come into play in terms of self-governance and the number of boards that you have to deal with as a legislator. But she talked about ambulance districts. I have to ask you, you know, I certainly know the answer, but for the people out there, they're going to hear this argument tomorrow. How much did ambulance districts weigh into the decision of the redistricting committee?
That was the only time ambulance districts were referenced, or water districts, or anything like that. You know, we focused on counties, cities, and townships, and as much as possible trying to keep school districts, you know, within a legislative area as possible. You know, the reality, again, with depopulation and the reduced a number of people in those rural areas, you know, if we're really concerned about ambulance districts, then I'd encourage some of these legislators from rural areas to really start advocating for stronger Medicaid expansion, start advocating to make sure that we are funding programs like rural EMTs and making sure that those folks, those volunteer firefighters we depend on, maybe they can access the health insurance program that state employees and legislators get. You know, if we want to try to find a way to incentivize and thank people for the work that they're doing. So to cry foul now in the 11th hour is unfortunate, but, you know, the priorities of the committee were counties, cities, townships.
So as you move forward, what's the process from here on? Today, obviously, being one of the final decision days, you can come in and make that argument in front of the committee tomorrow, but certain decisions were made today. Certain things were going to go forward, and basically you mentioned 95% complete. Some could argue, looking at the map, that it goes beyond that it is complete. Do you see anything changing tomorrow when it comes to it?
Not tomorrow is too late. Again, our goal is to really make some of those tweaks that have to work so that we're within the 5% standard deviation above or below the target population. We're going to talk about sub-districts, especially for tribal communities, and hopefully have a plan for that. And then our staff, who have been phenomenal, are likely going to work till 11, midnight, 1 o'clock tonight and show up tomorrow at 8 or 9 with the final map for us to review. And the committee will likely move that map out and then send it to legislative management, who in a few weeks will approve it and send it on to the full legislative assembly to deliberate again on November 8th when we meet for special session.
For a state with a little over 700,000 people, if you look at other states and legislative districts and what those districts average per population, North Dakota comes in pretty low. Let's use the figure 16,000 people. If you look at 16,000 people per legislative district, we don't stack up in terms of the amount of people you serve per other states. And so, do we have too many legislative districts?
I do think we are getting. Well, first of all, North Dakotans are very well represented. Those 16,000 people have 2 representatives and a senator in each legislative district. But with that, I think creates some challenges in the fact that it's hard for us to, for lack of a better word, professionalize our positions. We are citizen legislators. I go back home, I'm juggling 2 professional jobs on top of family and friends and everything else we have, and that's the truth for all of us. Look at South Dakota. There's more people in South Dakota, and I think they have 35 Senate districts. They represent larger swaths of land. They're still a citizen legislature, but they're also probably more engaged and more involved in the process than what our legislators are. So that's, I think, the philosophical discussion. And I'd rather see us not be full-time legislators, but more professionalized legislators who are really digging deep into the issues around healthcare and education funding, water resources. So we're making sound decisions instead of worrying about national talking points.
If you can, guys, put the map back up. I want to show one more factor that stuck out with the map to me, and that is in Kidder, Sheridan, Wells, Eddy, Benson, Pierce counties. And there's a lot of people that talk about, if you go down to, District 12, and 12 and 14 being good examples, that if you look at how Stutzman 29 were drawn out, that they were done specifically, let's use 29 for an example, so that Senator Wanzik could remain in his district after having moved into Jamestown. Is this still an issue, though, in some cases? Did we still, and when I say we, the majority party, did they still protect some of their legislators?
Absolutely. And they unabashedly admitted that in committee hearings. And so anyone could go watch the videos from those discussions and see, if you look, District 29 and 12, the border there is actually something that supposedly we're going to fix today, because in a rush proposal, Representative Hedlund accidentally or purposely, we don't know, put him and Senator Wanzik into District 12, into Jamestown proper, and without maybe consulting everyone in that area. You see up in Dunn County has 4 legislative districts for about 23 or 3,000 people. When asked about why is that little corner jutting up like that on the southeast corner, the answer from the legislator who proposed it was that was to protect an incumbent legislator. And so that was a priority for many of our colleagues. Senator Oban and I definitely pushed for, it's not about incumbent protection, it's about the best representation for the people of North Dakota, and they should decide that regardless of political party or who's an incumbent and who's not. And that's why the map we proposed really avoided a lot of those districts or incumbency and more focused on common sense lines that make sense to voters.
So don't make me look foolish here. So if I'm wrong, just lie and go along with it. But I think there's 53 counties in North Dakota, right or wrong?
Correct.
Do you know where everyone is now?
I pretty well can put together the puzzle map now. I think I tweeted last week, I thought running statewide office made me educated, but the redistricting process definitely I know that where Towner is in Lemoore County compared to the cities of Towner and Lemoore.
Yeah. When we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about money, because this special session is about money as well. The Fed sent a bunch of money to North Dakota, and of course the budget looks in a way, well, it's way rosier than what it had looked prior to sine die last time. So stick around. We're going to have more with Minority Leader Josh Boschee right after this. Good to have you coming back with us here on Beck News on Down the Road. I hung on to Representative Josh Boschee, the minority leader in the North Dakota House. And one of the reasons was I wanted to talk money and this special session and how money is going to play a role in it. Representative Boschee, there's money sitting around that the federal government sent us and wanted us to put it to work. Will you, in the legislature, put it to work?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be a sin if we didn't. We received $1.007 billion from the American Rescue Plan back in March, and it's been sitting in the Bank of North Dakota since then. And so I know if we were to ask all 700,000 North Dakotans what to do with that money, they'd have 700,000 different ideas. But the Democratic caucus last week unveiled our plan, and we have three main areas that we really think will benefit all North Dakotans and all communities. This is one-time money, so it should be going to programs or things that are about starting up or reinvigorating programs. It shouldn't go to long-term programs that need long-term funding. That's the point of the budget process within our regular revenues and expenses. So first and foremost, the number one issue we want to make sure funding happens in this session is quality childcare. I don't think there's a day we open up the newspaper and not hear employers, parents, local governments, school districts talking about the need for quality childcare. We know that there's a lot of people, specifically mothers, who aren't going back to work because the cost of childcare is more than what they make if they go back to work. So if we can figure out how to have a quality funding program, similar to like we do K-12, where there's a base formula from state resources that's incentivizing quality childcare and making sure that we have highly educated people providing that care, we can put North Dakota back to work, and it becomes a recruitment tool to get workforce to move here and bring their families who are going to buy houses and pay property taxes and spend their money. So childcare is the number one infrastructure piece that we've been pushing. And fortunately, the governor's office agrees. I think we're seeing some of our Republican colleagues agree because they're hearing about it. It's just we need North Dakotans to continue to beat that drum and let their legislators know how it's impacting their families. I mean, think of how many grandparents we know who are now full-time daycare providers. And they're doing it for no compensation. And God bless them for doing it. But there is a way that we can do this to make sure families stay strong and that people get back to work. Beyond childcare, of course, investment in physical infrastructure and things that we call a soft infrastructure, roads and bridges. We need to get broadband connectivity in some of these areas that are underserved. And then, of course, natural gas pipelines to communities that can help sustain the workforce they have, as well as bring in new economic development. Beyond that, Senator Tim Mathern, who's been a leader in this conversation, has this great proposal in which we incentivize local hospitals and healthcare providers to have healthcare or behavioral health beds. So instead of us spending a bunch of money building one structure in a place like Jamestown, we invest in the hospitals and the service providers in Jamestown, in Williston, and Grand Forks, and Fargo, and Rugby to provide healthcare there so people can be close to their family. There's no reason we should be putting people in cop cars or the sheriff's deputy tolling them down to Jamestown when if we can provide beds and services in their communities, they're going to get better care. Beyond that, it's no stranger to anyone that's heard me speak or any of my colleagues. We need a strong voluntary paid family leave program. It's a program that would support new parents, people taking care of their aging parents, people who are sicknesses that are long-term illnesses. But we also know if we have something that's statewide, it helps small businesses, it helps large businesses, helps every community. And again, it'd be a reason people would move here to invest in our communities and to call North Dakota home.
Is the North Dakota Chamber getting behind this? Because I can't listen to any source of media without hearing a commercial where people are asking for help, where they're asking for employees to come, and they're short employees, and because of that, we're short of where these companies can go to in terms of the next level. You know that, I know that, and so you would think that that would be one right off the bat that the Department of Commerce would understand. Then you go to broadband. This one's simple. If you go to the areas that the old, I'm old enough to call it Ma Bell or Quest or US West or whatever you want to call it. You go to areas where that was served versus your rural telecoms, it's atrocious. They can't get broadband in areas like Hillsborough. And so that one allows business to succeed. And then you go into behavioral health. Tim Mathern's been talking about this for a long time, keeping people close to where they can get healthy, which means you're expanding that coverage into home areas. And of course, your last one, family leave. The states that these folks are going to for higher pay, one of the issues is family leave. They want to be able to take care of grandma if grandma falls. They want to be able to look out for mom and dad. These all strike me as something that North Dakota's chamber would support. Do you have their support?
Not at this point. The state chamber, at least. There have been conversations during the session to ask them how we can make this work so that they would be advocates for the workforce as much as they are for the employers that they represent. And it's been met with silence. We hope to get them on board because our local chambers, I can tell you from the Fargo-Moorhead Chamber and I think the Bismarck-Mandan Chamber, the conversations that have happened there is that those employers who are generally the smaller regional employers, they like some of these ideas, but there is a disconnect between the local chambers and the state chamber. And we've been talking about that since this last session with those entities in hopes that we can get more cohesion and work all of North Dakota, regardless if you employ 2 people or 500 people. We should have an economy and a system set up that benefits all families, all workers.
If employers don't get involved in childcare, I'm sorry, but they have to. They're not going to get the employees they want. If they don't get involved with paid family leave, they're not going to get the employees they want. If they don't get along with, the infrastructure such as broadband, they're not going to be able to expand the way they want. And if you look at other states, that's what we're competing against. So by pushing that agenda, whether it comes from the minority or the majority, it sure seems to me you're doing the right thing. Representative Boschee, thanks for all the hard work. Thanks for coming down the road with us.